When I arrived at the restaurant for my daughter's wedding, her groom rolled his eyes and muttered, "Oh no, that old man is here again." But then his father's eyes widened and he whispered, "Is it really him?" All the servers hid in the shadows and the guests were stunned. They finally understood who I really was, and that day became not just my daughter's wedding day, but the day justice prevailed. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Interesting little place. Bit old-fashioned though, isn't it? Leland Harrington stood in my doorway, scanning the hardwood floors and vintage wallpaper with the expression of someone examining a museum exhibit. His expensive casual clothes, pressed khakis, and a polo that cost more than my monthly grocery budget announced his discomfort with being here. "We like it here," I managed, forcing a smile as I stepped aside to let him in. Beatrix grew up in this house. My daughter appeared from the kitchen, radiant in her blue sundress, nervously touching her engagement ring. "Leland, you found it okay?" She kissed his cheek while I noticed he barely returned the gesture. Eventually, GPS had trouble with this neighborhood. He glanced around again, taking in the family photos lining the hallway, the worn but quality furniture my late wife and I had collected over decades. People of your generation usually don't understand current trends in home design. The words hit like a slap, delivered with such casual dismissiveness that I almost missed their sting. Beatrice's face flushed pink. "Dad's been cooking all morning. Come on, let's eat." I'd spent hours preparing lamb chops with rosemary, roasted vegetables, and fresh bread. The dining room table gleamed with my best dishes, cloth napkins folded just so. Leland settled into his chair like he was doing us a favor, immediately checking his phone. "So Leland," I began serving the plates. "Beatrix tells me you work in finance, investment consulting, high-end portfolio management." He cut his lamb with surgical precision, took a small bite, then set his fork down. "Complex stuff requires understanding market dynamics that, well, most people your age wouldn't grasp." Beatrix jumped in quickly. "Dad's very financially savvy, actually. He's always given me great advice about." "I'm sure he has." Leland's smile was thin. "Different generations, different approaches. Nothing wrong with keeping things simple. Simple as if my life's work was a child's lemonade stand." I watched him push food around his plate, taking tiny bites like he was afraid of contamination. The man my daughter loved couldn't even pretend to enjoy the meal I'd poured my heart into. "This house has such character," Beatrice said, desperately trying to steer conversation to safer ground. "The original crown molding, the bay windows." Leland glanced at his watch. "Could use updating, though. These old places, outdated electrical. Probably asbestos in the walls. When we're married, we'll definitely want something more modern. Contemporary design, smart home features. When we're married, not if. When." As if my daughter's future was already decided, her childhood home already condemned. I refilled his water glass, though he hadn't asked. "Have you two thought about the wedding yet? Any ideas about venues?" Beatrix's eyes lit up. "Oh yes, we've been looking at the finest establishments in the city," Leland interrupted. "Money's no object, of course. We want something that reflects our status properly." "Our status?" I noticed he said "our," but looked only at me when he said it, as if establishing dominance over some imagined territory. The fog outside my windows was thickening, typical late afternoon San Francisco weather. Inside, the temperature was dropping too. I served dessert, homemade apple pie, and watched Leland take one polite bite before abandoning it entirely. "Well," he said, rechecking his phone, "I suppose we should discuss the practical details, wedding planning, guest lists, that sort of thing." His tone suggested we were planning a business merger rather than celebrating love. I looked at my daughter, still trying to keep conversation flowing, trying to make this work. Her happiness mattered more than my bruised pride. But something cold was settling in my chest, a calculation beginning to form. This man saw us as obstacles to overcome, problems to solve, outdated fixtures to be replaced. He'd made that clear enough. What he didn't know was that some old things have sharp edges when handled carelessly. The conversation was shifting toward wedding venues now. Beatrice mentioning places she'd seen online. Perfect timing for my next move. "I know an excellent restaurant for weddings," I said, clearing the last of the dinner plates. "Reasonable prices, but excellent quality. The chef there does fantastic work with reasonable prices." Leland's fork clattered against his dessert plate. "We're not beggars. The wedding will be at my father's restaurant, Harrington's Prime, the finest establishment in the city." His voice had jumped 2 octaves. Beatrice nearly spilled her coffee. Leland, calm down. Dad was trying to help. Help? He stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood. Your father thinks we need help finding a reasonable venue. Do you understand what kind of insult that is? I kept my voice level, curious. I apologize. I didn't realize your family was in the restaurant business. Not just any restaurant business. His chest puffed out like a rooster defending territory. Harrington's Prime, 5-star dining. We've hosted governors, tech executives, international dignitaries. The wedding industry calls us when they want true luxury. That sounds impressive, genuinely interested. Now, whereabouts is it located? Downtown Financial District, corner of Montgomery and Bush. Pride radiated from every word. My father built that empire from nothing. Started with one small bistro 30 years ago. Now we're the premier fine dining destination in Northern California. Beatrice was shooting warning looks between us. But I pressed gently forward. Your father must be quite the businessman. How many employees does a place like that require? 47 full-time staff. Executive chef poached from New York. Sommelier trained in France. Host staff that speaks multiple languages. Each detail delivered like ammunition. The kitchen alone costs more to build than most people make in 5 years. And you're involved in the day-to-day operations. I handle the business side, financial planning, investment strategies, vendor negotiations. His earlier condescension was replaced by aggressive pride. Someone has to keep the book straight when you're running a multi-million-dollar operation. Multi-million-dollar, 47 employees, downtown real estate. The numbers were adding up in my head, creating a picture I found very interesting indeed. That's fascinating, I said. The overhead must be enormous. Rent in that area alone. Rent? Leland laughed. But there was an edge to it. We own the building. Bought it outright in 2019. No bank loans, no investors. Pure family money. Pure family money. I filed that detail away carefully. Beatrice had gone quiet, watching this exchange with growing unease. She could sense the undercurrents here. The way two men size each other up, but she couldn't know what I was really measuring. Well, I said finally, it sounds like Beatrice will have quite the celebration. I'm sure your father's restaurant will provide precisely the kind of wedding she deserves. Exactly. Leland straightened his polo shirt, satisfied he'd established proper hierarchy. The Harrington name means something in this city. Quality, tradition, excellence, things that matter. Things that matter, unlike reasonable prices apparently. Unlike this old-fashioned house where his future wife grew up happy and loved. I could see he was done with us now, ready to escape back to his world of proper breeding and contemporary design. The meal was clearly over in his mind, even though my homemade pie sat barely touched on his plate. Speaking of the restaurant, I said casually, what kind of cuisine does your father specialize in? New American with French influences. Prix offers fixed menus starting at $120 per person. Wine pairings extra. We're booked solid through December. He rechecked his watch more obviously this time. Actually, I should probably head out soon, early morning tomorrow. The fog outside had thickened into proper San Francisco gloom, and I could see Leland was already mentally out the door. But he'd given me exactly what I needed. Pride-fueled details about the family business, specific location information, financial bragging disguised as conversation. 47 employees depending on Harrington's Prime for their livelihoods. Multi-million-dollar operation. Prime real estate owned outright. All very impressive, but also very vulnerable if something went wrong. Of course, I said. Thank you so much for coming. This has been educational. Well, I really should get going. Leland stood abruptly, already reaching for his jacket. The evening fog had settled thick outside the windows, and he seemed eager to escape before it got worse. The goodbye was awkward, a brief handshake for me, a distracted kiss on Beatrice's cheek. I'll call you tomorrow about the venue details, he told her, already moving toward the door. We need to lock in dates soon. I watched from the porch as he climbed into his black BMW. Of course, it was a BMW and pulled away with unnecessary acceleration. The taillights disappeared into the fog within seconds, leaving behind only the faint smell of expensive exhaust. Beatrice stood beside me, her arms wrapped around herself against the chill. I'm sorry about Leland, she said quietly. He's just very protective of the family business. Sometimes he gets defensive when people suggest reasonable alternatives, she winced. Dad, please. He didn't mean anything by it. His father's worked so hard to build that restaurant. They're proud of what they've accomplished. I understand pride, I said, guiding her back inside where warmth waited. But pride and arrogance aren't the same thing. We settled in the living room where the lamplight was softer, more forgiving. Beatrice curled into the corner of the sofa, the same spot she'd claimed as a child when we had our serious talks. "He made you feel small," she said finally. "I could see it. The way he talked about the house, about your suggestions." Her voice was thick with embarrassment. I tried to redirect the conversation, but he just kept going. "Beatrice." I sat across from her, leaning forward. "I need you to do something for me, and I need you not to ask questions about it right now." Her eyebrows lifted. "What kind of something?" "Don't tell him about my work, what I do for a living, where I work, any of it. Just keep that information private for now." "Dad, he already thinks you're just some retiree puttering around the house. Why would I need to trust me on this one? Can you do that?" She studied my face, searching for clues I wasn't ready to give. Finally, she nodded. "Of course, but you're being mysterious, and I don't like mysteries. Sometimes mysteries have good reasons behind them." A car door slammed outside. Leland's BMW returning. Beatrice jumped up to look out the window. "He's back. Probably forgot something." But instead of coming to the door, I heard the engine rev again. Through the fog, I caught a glimpse of Beatrice running toward the street. Her blue dress bright against the gray evening. She'd left her jacket inside. I watched from the window as she climbed into the passenger seat. Brief conversation, gestures I couldn't read. Then they were gone again, this time for good. The house felt different with them gone. Larger, quieter, but also somehow more purposeful. I cleaned the dinner dishes methodically, thinking about Harrington's prime location at the corner of Montgomery and Bush. With 47 employees and a multi-million-dollar operation, family-owned. Leland Harrington thought he knew exactly what kind of man I was. Some simple retiree who didn't understand modern business, who lived in an old-fashioned house and made naive suggestions about reasonable restaurant prices. A man whose daughter had risen above her modest beginnings to catch herself a prize. He had no idea that some old things are more dangerous than they appear. I dried the last plate and headed upstairs to my office. Time to do a little research about the Harrington family business, just out of curiosity, of course, to better understand the empire my future son-in-law was so proud of. My computer hummed to life in the darkness. The screen's glow reflecting off the window where fog pressed against the glass like curious fingers. My office felt like a sanctuary after the afternoon's performance. 2 computer monitors hummed to life as I settled into the worn leather chair that had witnessed countless late-night research sessions. Outside, the fog was thickening into evening, but inside, fluorescent light cast everything in sharp focus. I typed Harrington's Prime San Francisco into the search bar and watched the results populate. Their website appeared first. Glossy photos of perfectly plated dishes, elegant dining room shots, testimonials praising exceptional cuisine and impeccable service. The kind of marketing polish that costs serious money. Location confirmed. 47 Montgomery Street, corner of Bush, downtown financial district. Just as Leland had boasted. Hours: Tuesday through Saturday 5:30 to 10:30 p.m., closed Sundays and Mondays. Prix Fixe menu starting at $120 per person, exactly as he'd said, but websites lie. Reviews tell different stories. I clicked through to Yelp, Google reviews, and OpenTable ratings. The pattern emerged quickly, too quickly for comfort. Mixed reviews leaning heavily negative over the past 6 months. Complaints about slow service, overpriced mediocre food, staff who acted like they were doing customers a favor. Waited 45 minutes for appetizers, read one recent review. Steak was overcooked and cold. When I mentioned it, the waiter rolled his eyes and said the kitchen was backed up. Never again. Another beautiful space. Terrible execution. Our server disappeared for 20-minute stretches. Food was lukewarm when it finally arrived. For these prices, completely unacceptable. I pulled out a yellow legal pad. Old habits from decades of taking notes and started writing. Service complaints consistent across multiple reviews. Food quality declining over past year. Staff attitude universally described as condescending or indifferent. These could be competitors writing fake reviews, maybe disgruntled customers with unrealistic expectations. But the patterns were too specific, too detailed. Real customers mentioned specific dishes, specific servers, specific dates. This wasn't a coordinated attack. This was a business in decline. My pen tapped against the desk as I read deeper. Health Department inspection reports from the city website. 2 violations in the past 8 months. Improper food storage temperatures. Inadequate hand-washing stations. Minor infractions but telling ones. Good restaurants don't accumulate violations. Leland had painted a picture of culinary excellence, five-star dining, governors and tech executives choosing Harrington's Prime for important occasions. But the evidence suggested something different entirely, a restaurant trading on past reputation while current operations crumbled. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. This wasn't just about my daughter's wedding venue anymore. This was about her future with a man whose family business might be built on quicksand. The clock on my computer read 5:30 p.m., dinner time for most people. But Harrington's Prime didn't open until Tuesday. I had 2 days to decide whether to investigate further, or trust that the negative reviews were outliers, that Leland's confidence was justified, 2 days to choose between a protective father and an interfering older man. I closed the laptop with a soft click, but the restaurant's address was already memorized. 847 Montgomery Street, Tuesday through Saturday. It may be time to see for myself whether the Harrington empire was as solid as Leland claimed. Monday dragged past like a guilty conscience. I'd spent the weekend replaying Saturday's lunch, analyzing every condescending comment, every dismissive gesture. By Monday evening, curiosity had hardened into determination. The downtown fog hung thick as I walked the 3 blocks from the Montgomery Street BART station to 847. Montgomery. Harrington's Prime occupied the ground floor of a renovated 19th century building, its facade promising old-world elegance, brass fixtures, etched glass windows, and a burgundy awning with gold lettering. First impressions mattered in the restaurant business, and theirs made the correct statement. A hostess in black dress and forced smile greeted me. "Good evening. Do you have a reservation? I would like to know if you have something available for one." Her eyes swept over my casual blazer and khakis. Acceptable but not impressive. "We're busy tonight, but we can accommodate you." The tone suggested she was doing me a favor. "Right this way, please." She led me to a small table near the kitchen doors, the kind of spot reserved for walk-ins and customers the staff considered unimportant. Fine by me. Better view of operations from here anyway. The dining room tried hard to evoke sophistication, dark wood paneling, crisp white tablecloths, subdued lighting from crystal fixtures, but my trained eye caught the details others missed. Water spots on the glasses, slight tears in the upholstery, carpet worn thin in the height traffic areas, the kind of accumulated wear that suggested deferred maintenance, corners cut where customers wouldn't immediately notice. A waiter approached, menu in hand. Young man, probably college-aged, with the particular brand of arrogance that comes from working somewhere that considers itself exclusive. "Can I start you with something to drink?" he asked, though his attention was already drifting to more promising tables. "Just water for now." "I want a few minutes with the menu." He nodded and disappeared without enthusiasm. I studied the offerings. New American cuisine with French influences, exactly as Leland had described. Felt mignon for $58. Lobster risotto for $42. Duck comfort for $39. Premium prices for what better be premium execution around me. The restaurant hummed with the kind of forced energy that comes from staff trying too hard. Servers moved with studied efficiency, but I noticed the timing was off. Tables receiving appetizers while others still waited for drink orders. Entras arriving before appetizers were cleared. Basic service rhythm completely disrupted. The couple at the table next to mine was discussing their delayed meal in increasingly frustrated whispers. 20 minutes for bread service, the woman muttered. "At these prices, this is ridiculous." When my waiter returned, I was ready. "I'll have the filet mignon medium rare with the potato gratin." "Of course," he said. But there was something in his tone, a barely concealed smirk, as if my order amused him somehow. "That'll be right out." Right out turned into 45 minutes. I watched other tables receive their food while mine remained conspicuously empty. When the plate finally arrived, the steak was overcooked and lukewarm. The potato gratin congealed into an unappetizing mass. "How is everything?" the waiter asked perfunctorily, already moving away before I could answer. "Actually," I called him back, "this steak is well done, not medium rare." He glanced at the plate with theatrical concern. "Oh well, the kitchen's really backed up right now. I could ask them to fix it, but it'll probably be another 30 minutes. Another 30 minutes at a restaurant that charged premium prices and claimed exceptional service. I thought about the health department violations, the negative reviews, the declining standards hidden behind marketing polish. "That's fine," I said. "I'll eat it as is." The relief on his face was almost comical. Clearly, most customers who complained were made to wait for so long that they gave up. Efficient way to avoid kitchen costs while maintaining the illusion of fine dining. I ate slowly, observing everything. Staff huddled in corners, complaining about customers and management. Kitchen sounds of dropped pans and raised voices, the unmistakable atmosphere of a workplace where standards had slipped, and no one particularly cared about fixing them. By the time I signaled for the check, I had everything I needed to know about Harrington's Prime. This wasn't a five-star establishment hosting governors and tech executives. This was a failing restaurant coasting on reputation while delivering substandard service to customers who were either too polite or too intimidated to complain effectively. My daughter wanted to hold her wedding reception here. The thought made my stomach clench tighter than the overcooked steak. The check sat on my table like an accusation. 80 savalan for a mediocre meal and indifferent service. I was reaching for my wallet when I heard a door slam somewhere behind me, followed by sharp footsteps on hardwood. "What is he doing here?" The voice carried across the dining room with unmistakable authority and anger. I turned to see Leland emerging from what appeared to be a back office. His face flushed red as he spotted me at my corner table. Other diners began to notice the commotion, conversations dropping to whispers. He strode across the restaurant like a man approaching battle, weaving between tables with barely controlled fury. The staff I'd been watching all evening suddenly found urgent tasks that required their immediate attention. Heads down, avoiding eye contact with their boss. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, arriving at my table with enough force to make the water glasses tremble. "Did you come to spy on my restaurant?" I set down my napkin carefully, maintaining the same calm I'd practiced through decades of difficult situations. "I just wanted to have dinner, Leland. Your restaurant has quite a reputation." "That's complete nonsense." His voice rose another octave, drawing stares from every occupied table. "You're here to cause trouble, to undermine our business somehow." The accusation was so paranoid, so detached from reality that I almost laughed. "Leland, I ordered a meal and ate it. There's nothing sinister about get out." The words came like a slap. "Get out of here immediately." The dining room had gone completely silent now. Servers stood frozen with plates in their hands, watching their boss have a public meltdown. The hostess looked mortified. The couple next to me was openly staring, probably wondering if they should call for help. "Leland," I said quietly, "you're making a scene." I said, "Get out." He was practically shouting now, face purple with rage. "You have no business being here. This is harassment." Harassment for eating dinner at a public restaurant. I wondered what his father would think of this performance, what the other customers were thinking as they watched the supposed financial director of Harrington's Prime lose control completely. I stood slowly pulling cash from my wallet and placing it on the table. Exact amount plus tip. Despite the terrible service, professional habits die hard, and I wasn't about to give him ammunition by skipping out on the bill. "I'll leave," I said loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "Thank you for the educational evening." The walk to the door felt endless. Every eye in the restaurant followed my progress, some sympathetic, others simply curious about the drama unfolding. Behind me, I could hear Leland still ranting to no one in particular about spies and harassment and respect for family businesses. The cool evening air hit my face like salvation. I strolled down Montgomery Street, processing what had just happened. Leland's paranoid overreaction, his complete loss of professional composure, the way his own staff had cowered rather than support him, all of it painted a picture I was beginning to understand. This wasn't just a restaurant with service problems. This was a business being run by someone fundamentally unstable, someone who saw enemies in paying customers and threats in reasonable questions. And my daughter wanted to build her life with this man. The fog swirled around the street lamps as I headed toward the BART station, but my mind was crystal clear. I'd come here looking for information about a wedding venue. Instead, I discovered something much more troubling. A future son-in-law whose judgment and temperament were far worse than I'd imagined. The fog swirled thick around the Montgomery Street lamps as I walked away from Harrington's Prime, my footsteps echoing off wet pavement. Other pedestrians hurried past with heads down, everyone eager to escape the damp chill settling over downtown San Francisco. Behind me, I could still see the restaurant's warm glow, could imagine the whispered conversations about the man who'd been publicly ejected for the crime of eating dinner. Professional humiliation wasn't new to me, but this felt different, personal, raw in a way that caught me off guard. I turned onto Bush Street, letting muscle memory guide me toward the Powell Street BART station. My route took me past 3 other restaurants. A cozy Italian place with checkered tablecloths, a trendy gastropub with craft beer signs, a hole-in-the-wall Chinese joint that had been serving the same family recipes for decades. Each one buzzed with satisfied customers, efficient service, the kind of atmosphere that made people want to return. Everything Harrington's Prime pretended to be but wasn't. The walk helped clear my head, the rhythm of footsteps replacing the chaos of Leland shouting. By the time I reached Market Street, shock was giving way to analysis. What I'd witnessed tonight wasn't just poor service or one stormy evening. This was systematic failure. Understaffed kitchen, undertrained servers, management that responded to problems with aggression instead of solutions. If he treats his future father-in-law this way, what will happen to Beatrice after the wedding? The question followed me down into the BART station, through the turnstiles onto the train that would carry me back toward home. I'd seen this pattern before in my professional life. Businesses that looked successful from the outside while rotting from within. Pride masking incompetence, arrogance hiding desperation. Leland's explosion tonight hadn't been about protecting his restaurant's reputation. It had been about protecting lies. The train swayed gently as we crossed under the bay, and I found myself thinking about my late wife. Sarah would have had strong opinions about tonight's events. She'd always been better at reading people than I was. Quicker to spot the warning signs that someone wasn't what they seemed. Trust your instincts, she used to say. Your brain knows things your heart doesn't want to accept. My instincts were screaming now. Leland Harrington wasn't just rude or entitled. He was dangerous, not in a physical sense necessarily, but in the way that weak men with power often become dangerous through manipulation, through control, through the gradual erosion of everyone around them, and Beatrice was planning to marry him in 6 weeks. The train pulled into my station and I climbed the stairs back to street level. The fog was thicker here in the residential neighborhoods, muffling sound and turning streetlights into soft halos. I walked the familiar blocks toward home, past houses where families were settling in for the evening, past lives that seemed more straightforward and safer than the one my daughter was choosing. By the time I reached my front door, my professional mind was fully engaged. I had information now, concrete evidence of poor business practices, unstable management, and a man whose public behavior suggested serious character flaws. The question was what to do with that information. Inside, the house felt too quiet, too empty. I hung my coat in the hallway closet and was reaching for the light switch when my phone started ringing. How could you do that, Dad? Leland told me everything. Beatrice's voice hit like a physical blow, pure fury crackling through the phone line. No greeting, no gentle questioning. Just immediate attack from someone who'd already made up her mind about guilt and innocence. Beatrice, it's not what you think. He said you came to the restaurant and caused a scene. That you embarrassed him in front of his customers and staff. Her voice broke slightly, pain mixing with anger. How could you humiliate him like that? I sank into the living room chair, still holding my coat. I went there for dinner. That's all I wanted to see. You went there to spy on him, to find fault with his family's business. Each accusation landed with increasing intensity. He trusted you enough to tell you about the restaurant, and you used that against him. The manipulation was breathtaking in its completeness. Leland had gotten to her first, shaped the narrative, cast himself as victim before I'd even walked through my front door. My calm, rational daughter, the woman who usually thought through problems carefully, had been transformed into an emotional weapon aimed at her own father. Beatrice, please listen to me. I ordered a meal. Stop lying. The words came out as a sob. Leland said you harassed the staff, complained about everything, tried to make trouble for his father's business, and when he politely asked you to leave, you made a scene. Politely asked. The phrase was so far from reality it was almost funny, except nothing about this conversation was amusing. That's not what happened, I said, keeping my voice level despite the growing knot in my stomach. I was a paying customer. I ordered dinner, ate it, and was preparing to leave when he spotted me. He became aggressive. He was protecting his family's reputation from someone who came there with malicious intent. Malicious intent. She was using his exact words now, pairing his version of events with complete conviction. The speed of her transformation was stunning. This was the same daughter who'd apologized for his behavior just days ago, who'd promised to keep my profession secret, who'd seemed uncomfortable with his arrogance. Sweetheart, I understand you want to defend him, but don't call me sweetheart. The fury in her voice was unlike anything I'd ever heard from her. You've shown your true feelings about Leland. You don't want me to be happy. You can't stand that I found someone successful and accomplished. That's not true. I want nothing more than your happiness. Then why did you go to his restaurant to cause trouble? Why couldn't you stay out of our lives? Stay out of our lives. The phrase cut deeper than the accusations. This was my daughter. The little girl I'd raised alone after her mother died. The woman I'd supported through college and career struggles and relationship heartbreaks. And now she was telling me to stay out of her life because a man she'd known for 8 months had convinced her I was the enemy. Beatrice. I tried one more time. Please consider that there might be another side to this story. That may be. There is no other side. Her voice was final, absolute. I believe the man I'm going to marry. I believe someone who loves me. And if you can't respect that, if you can't respect him, then you shouldn't be part of our wedding. The threat hung in the air like smoke. I sat in my dark living room still wearing my coat, listening to my daughter's harsh breathing through the phone. Outside, the fog pressed against the windows like curious ghosts. I see, I said quietly. Do you? Do you really? Because I'm done with this conversation. I'm done with your suspicions and your interference. Leland was right. Some people just can't be happy for others' success. The line went dead. I sat holding the phone long after the dial tone faded, staring at the device as if it might ring again with an apology, an explanation, anything that would restore the daughter I thought I knew. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the distant sounds of the city settling it into night. Leland hadn't just ejected me from his restaurant. He'd ejected me from my daughter's life. The weeks that followed moved like a slow-motion disaster. I called Beatrix number 17 times over the next month. Each attempt met with voicemail. Each message left increasingly desperate. My texts showed as delivered, but they were never read. Electronic messages disappearing into the void of her anger. Beatrice, please call me back. We need to talk about what really happened. Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. This silence isn't like you. I love you. Nothing else matters. But silence was exactly like her when she'd made up her mind. Even as a child, Beatrice could shut out the world when she felt betrayed. The trait that had protected her from playground bullies was now protecting her from her own father. My house felt hollow without her weekly visits, without the sound of her laughter echoing from the kitchen where she'd helped me cook Sunday dinners. I found myself setting 2 places at the table from habit, then staring at the empty chair where she used to sit and complain about work. Ask for advice about men who weren't worth her time. Plan. The future that had seemed so bright just weeks ago. The future that now included Leland Harrington as a permanent fixture. I threw myself into work, staying late at the office, accepting assignments I'd typically delegate, anything to avoid coming home to the silence. My colleagues noticed the change but attributed it to everyday stress. None of them knew about the daughter who no longer answered my calls or the future son-in-law who'd successfully poisoned the most crucial relationship in my life. 3 weeks into the silence, I almost drove to her apartment, sat in my car outside her building for 20 minutes, watching her windows for signs of life. But what would I say? How do you convince someone they've been manipulated when the manipulator has made you the villain of their story? I drove home without knocking on her door. May arrived with typical San Francisco unpredictability. Sunny mornings giving way to foggy afternoons, the city unable to decide what season it wanted to embrace. I was sorting through mail on a Tuesday evening when I saw the envelope. Thick cream paper, elegant calligraphy, the kind of formal invitation that announces essential occasions. Mr. Delbert Myers was cordially invited to the wedding of Miss Beatrix Catherine Myers and Mr. Leland James Harrington. Saturday, May 17, 2025. Reception to follow at Harrington's Prime tomorrow. I stared at the invitation, turning it over in my hands like it might contain hidden messages. After weeks of silence, she'd still invited me, either from obligation or hope, or because Leland had insisted show her father exactly how little his opinions mattered, by making him watch her marry the man he'd tried to warn her against. The reception would be at Harrington's Prime. Of course it would. The same restaurant where I'd been publicly humiliated, where Leland had revealed his true nature to a room full of witnesses. They wanted me to watch my daughter celebrate her future in the exact location where her fiancé had shown me who he really was. I set the invitation on my kitchen table and stared at it while I made coffee. 24 hours to decide whether to attend the wedding of someone who no longer spoke to me, to watch her bind her life to a man I knew would make her miserable. 24 hours to figure out how to save my daughter from the biggest mistake of her life. The coffee grew cold as I sat there planning. My professional mind was engaged now, calculating risks and opportunities, considering all the ways this could go wrong. But beneath the strategic thinking was something more straightforward and more powerful. A father's love that refused to give up, even when giving up seemed like the only rational choice. Tomorrow Beatrice would marry Leland Harrington. Tomorrow I would be there to watch it happen. Saturday morning arrived gray and cool, typical San Francisco weather that couldn't decide between seasons. I woke before dawn with the wedding invitation still visible on my nightstand. Cream paper catching the early light like an accusation. Today would change everything one way or another. The shower water ran hotter than usual, steam fogging the bathroom mirror as I let the heat work tension from my shoulders. Methodical preparation had always calmed my nerves before challenging assignments, and this morning would be no different. Shave with the grain, then against. Check for missed spots, hair combed precisely, not a strand out of place. In my walk-in closet, I surveyed the formal options with the same attention I'd once given to restaurant reviews. Navy suit, charcoal gray, classic black, each sent a different message. Today called for authority wrapped in respectability. The charcoal wool with subtle pinstripes tailored perfectly to project competence without ostentation. The tie selection took longer. Burgundy silk, conservative but rich. Sterling silver cufflinks my late wife had given me for our 20th anniversary. Italian leather shoes polished to mirror brightness. Every detail mattered when establishing credibility with people who judge appearances first. Standing before the full-length mirror, I barely recognized the man staring back. Months of takeout meals and sleepless nights had sharpened my features, added gravity to expressions that used to be softer. Professional armor, complete and impenetrable. The wedding gift sat wrapped on my dresser, a crystal vase from Tiffany, elegant and appropriate. Nothing that would reveal my true profession or financial capabilities, just a thoughtful father's present for his daughter's new life. The card inside contained 3 words. Love you always. I checked my watch. 8:30 a.m. The ceremony began at 2 p.m. reception immediately following. Enough time to drive downtown, find parking, and position myself strategically before the crucial moment arrived. Keys, wallet, invitation tucked into my breast pocket. One final glance around the house that had felt so empty for the past month, knowing that when I returned tonight everything would be different. Either I'd have my daughter back or I'd have lost her forever. But Leland Harrington would finally understand exactly who he'd been dealing with. The front door closed behind me with decisive finality. Time to remind certain people that respect isn't negotiable, and that some older men bite harder than others expect. Harrington's prime had been transformed into something approaching actual elegance. White silk draping softened the worn edges I'd noticed during my previous visit, while strategic lighting created warm pools that disguised water stains and carpet wear. Wedding magic hiding reality beneath beautiful surfaces. How perfectly appropriate. I entered during the cocktail hour, scanning the room for familiar faces. Guests mingled in small clusters, champagne glasses catching light from the crystal fixtures. The staff moved with unusual precision, clearly under strict orders to perform flawlessly for this special occasion. Dad. Beatrice's voice cut through the reception chatter like salvation. She appeared at my side in her wedding gown, ivory silk with delicate beading that caught the light when she moved. Beautiful beyond description, radiant with happiness that made my chest tighten with protective love. I'm so glad you came, she whispered, embracing me tightly. I was hoping, after everything that happened. Wild horses couldn't keep me away, I replied, meaning every word. You look absolutely stunning. Relief flooded her features. I've missed you so much. This whole month felt wrong without you here. Around us, I noticed several restaurant employees stealing glances in our direction. Word was spreading quickly through the staff. The man from that night was back, the one who'd caused such a scene with the boss. Nervous energy rippled through their ranks like stones dropped in still water. Across the room near the bar where wedding toasts would soon be offered, I spotted Leland deep in conversation with an older man who had to be his father. Wayne Harrington possessed the same arrogant bearing as his son, but tempered with the weariness that comes from actually running a business. They were discussing something intently, occasionally gesturing toward different areas of the restaurant. Oh no, that old man showed up again. Leland's voice carried further than he'd intended, reaching several nearby guests who turned with curious expressions. His father followed his gaze, landing directly on me with sharp calculation. Is that really him? Wayne's response held notes I couldn't immediately interpret. Recognition or concern that went deeper than simple wedding guest management. The conversation between father and son continued in lowered tones, but their body language spoke volumes. Wayne's questions, Leland's defensive responses, the way both men kept glancing in my direction with growing unease. Whatever reputation preceded me, it was significant enough to cause genuine worry. I stayed close to Beatrice, playing the devoted father role, while observing everything with professional detachment. Staff members whispered among themselves, some pointing discreetly in my direction. Guests began to notice the undercurrent of tension, conversations growing quieter as people sensed drama brewing beneath the wedding's polished surface. Wayne Harrington straightened his tie and began walking purposefully in our direction. Expression carefully neutral but eyes sharp with assessment. The moment I'd been waiting for was finally approaching. Behind him, Leland watched with visible anxiety, clearly dreading whatever conversation was about to unfold. Time for introductions. Good afternoon. Wayne Harrington extended his hand with practiced hospitality, but I caught the careful way he studied my face. I'm Wayne Harrington, father of the groom and owner of this establishment. We've not been properly introduced? Delbert Myers, I replied, accepting his handshake with firm confidence. Father of the bride. Ah, yes, of course. How do you find my restaurant? I do hope everything meets your expectations. The question hung in the air between us, loaded with more weight than simple politeness. Around us, nearby guests had begun to listen, sensing significance in this seemingly casual exchange. Don't worry, I said with careful precision, my voice carrying just far enough to reach interested ears. Today I'm just a guest, not a restaurant critic. The effect was immediate and electric. Wayne's handshake faltered, his eyes widening with sudden recognition. Several guests who'd been half listening snapped to attention, the words restaurant critic rippling through the crowd like wildfire. Staff members froze mid-service, understanding immediately that their previous treatment of this man had been catastrophically inappropriate. Wayne began, then stopped himself, diplomatic training wearing with evident dismay. Delbert Myers, San Francisco Chronicle, I confirmed calmly, though as I said, today I'm here to celebrate my daughter's wedding. Beatrix stared at me with shock and dawning understanding. Dad, you're a restaurant critic. That's your job. Before I could answer, Leland appeared at my elbow, his face pale and desperate. The arrogant man who'd publicly humiliated me 6 weeks ago had been replaced by someone who understood exactly how much trouble he was in. Please, he said quietly, his voice thick with barely controlled panic. Please forgive me. I had no idea who you were. I never would have the way I treated you. I see. I studied his face with the same clinical attention I'd once reserved for overcooked steaks and pretentious wine lists. Forgiveness takes time, Leland. Especially since because of your behavior, my daughter didn't speak to me for a month. The wedding reception continued around us, but our small circle had become the center of attention. Wayne worked frantically to manage the situation with diplomatic smiles and quiet damage control, while staff members exchanged horrified glances about their previous service. Leland's hand shook slightly as he reached for his champagne glass. Whatever I can do to make this right, and anything at all. What you can do, I said with measured calm, is treat people with respect in the future, regardless of who they are or what you think they can do for you. Beatrix slipped her arm through mine, understanding finally dawning in her eyes. This is why you asked me not to tell him about your work. Sometimes it's helpful to see how people behave when they think no one important is watching. I replied, watching Leland's face cycle through shame, fear, and desperate calculation. The man who'd called me an interfering old fool, who'd had me thrown out of his restaurant like a standard troublemaker, now stood before me, seeking forgiveness he hadn't earned. Justice served not through revenge, but through the simple revelation of truth. Wayne cleared his throat diplomatically. Let's discuss how to move forward from here. I looked at my daughter, radiant in her wedding gown, but finally seeing her fiancé clearly for the first time. The choice of what happened next would be hers to make, but at least now she'd make it with all the information she needed. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.